thank our co-hosts. A lot of you here already know them. So Cobuz is a specialized employer branding, digital employer branding agency, and digital HR, new in the running, is a community for the HR folks to learn how to, use the power of digital to the fullest. Okay, so thank you, Digital HR and Cobus, for being our co hosts for today. Now, to dive right into the subject, what we are going to discuss today is how to structure your digital workplace for your organization. Now, this honestly, I know it seems like this is all we are talking about just now with the given situation, but it isn't a topic that has just started. It is something that a lot of organizations have been talking about for a long time, maybe yours as well. I think what the crisis has done is it's just accelerated and pushed organizations to the deep end to say that, you can't think of doing this in your 5 year plan anymore. It has to happen now. So that's why we're here to talk about it. To give you just a little brief about myself, for those of you who don't know me yet, I won't bore you with too many details, but that's my name. I'm Krusha, two long surnames. I started my career as early as 19. I have worked in PR, in social media. I have studied international business in Singapore. And most importantly, I started working with Sociable back in 2016. So I started work with them in Paris. I worked for the European market. I loved the product. I saw just so much potential for the market in India that I convinced my management and brought the product and the company to India in March 2017. So, also for those of you who don't know who Sociable is, just a very brief introduction. We are a company, a SaaS company, that is headquartered in France. As I already mentioned, we have offices in New York, in London, and in India. And of course, we work with companies across the globe. What we do, so this isn't going to be too much of a pitch session, so I'm just going to introduce it to you so you know why we have the credibility to talk about the subject. What you see on your screen is Sociable. It's basically, as I said, a SaaS platform for employee communication, engagement, and advocacy. Ideally, if I had to say it in two lines, we basically provide you with a platform that helps you engage your employees internally, but then also helps you empower those employees to become your voice on social media, to become your advocates. Okay, that might sound like a lot of jargon just now, but I will touch into certain points of that through the presentation. So let's dive in. Why is the subject of the digital workplace so complicated? So, first, I think it's just a very unclear concept because it's one of those words that is being thrown around everywhere, especially on LinkedIn. And we are not exactly sure because of that which one is the right definition, right? Um, the next is there are a lot of solutions that fall into digital workplace umbrella because it does so many things. So many things are included in a digital workplace. And I think something that a lot of you may be facing that I've heard is you often have different tools who maybe do certain features that overlap, but then some are different. So I think that causes confusion as well. Multitude of voices. So I have first-hand experience in this. But when companies are trying to decide platforms and tools for their digital workplace, what often happens is you have legal, HR, communication, marketing, everyone involved because it is something that touches everyone's workflow, right? So I think having different voices like IT and comms and HR wanting different things sometimes causes it to be more complex as well. And lastly, I know coming from a solution provider, it may sound anti, but honestly, we all often think that a tool or platforms or technology is going to solve all our problems. And while it's a very important component of solving the current issues we have, just the tool alone still cannot function. Which I think is a good thing. We aren't obsolete yet. We are very much needed. The strategy, the consultancy is a big part of success there. Just gonna dive into a few of these points a little more. So one was the alignment. Like I mentioned, you're going to have different teams who are going to have a say in your digital workplace. So it's very, very important that all your different teams in the organization are aligned on the idea of the digital workplace. What is it for you? Okay. The next one, now this might sound like something you've heard a lot, that you need to have clear objectives and KPIs. We probably use this for anything we talk about in the workplace. But let me break down what I mean over here. So when you're deploying multiple tools in a digital workplace, and I don't know if this is something you've heard or even said before yourself, maybe, that we've deployed tools in the past, but it's just sitting there, no one's using it, nothing is working. And honestly, when you dig deeper, you sometimes realize that this is because the KPI and the objectives for that tool was not really set precisely. And it might seem obvious that, okay, of course, we want a tool for collaboration or for communication because it's what's needed. We need to work digitally. That's not enough. You need to go deeper. What is your goal? Is it because you feel like you need to get your workforce to be more productive at the moment? Do you feel there's a lack of alignment in the culture, vision, or values of the company? Do you need more engagement bottom up, or do you need something that's more secure? So what is your bottom line? Very important to know that. uh my favorite one. I might get a lot of backlash on this one, but honestly, we have for a very long time made the mistake of believing that one single solution, one single platform is going to solve all your problems. uh it's just, I think it comes personally, we think one fix fixes everything. It's not true. You cannot expect one platform to be a platform where your employee goes for payroll, where they go to apply for leave, where they also go to talk to each other, where they also talk to you as management, where they also collaborate on projects. It's just not possible, right? Uh, but there is a single access point that I still think is existent, and that is the mobile. Um, Today, I think with remote working, maybe we've realized this even more. But the portal is mobile. So all your different applications, I know there's a subject of security with some when it comes to documents, but at least a majority of them should be on your mobile, on your employee's mobile. So let's talk about why the portal is mobile and what are a few of the key things to remember here. So one is your mobile applications are all specialized apps. If you see here, even personally, we have specialized apps for different things, like a specialized WhatsApp, Facebook, Instagram, email. We have so many personally. And this is something that's going to mirror in the professional workplace and already is, that you're going to have different tools that do different things and have specialized mobile apps for these. Of course, I do agree though that on the professional front, it is nice and convenient and secure to have a simple authentication for your employees to log into these different apps. So maybe the same SSO, password, whatever it is that you want to implement. I still also agree that there should be a connectivity between all these applications. I should be able to share maybe one thing from one to another, for example. And very importantly, your mobile is going to help you form multiple user journeys. So let me give you a practical example. You're going to have an organization that maybe has employees that work from office, some that maybe work from home, some that maybe work from the factory. So we're going to have different types. We already do for a lot of organizations. So your mobile is going to help you form these different user journeys for your different users. The other thing with user journeys is also where your employee is. So maybe at different parts of the day, your employee is at different places, like in the office, at home, at the client's office. So again, or maybe in transit, just back and forth from office. Hopefully not anymore, but maybe still. So again, your mobile is going to help you reach your employee at these different access points and form these multiple user journeys. Okay. Now, if you've not been listening to me so far, I'm just calling out for attention to this slide because this is maybe, not maybe, for sure, the most important slide of my presentation. So, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to try to showcase and display to you what a digital workplace looks like. So, kind of this whole complex subject breaking down into easy tools that form a digital workplace. And what I want to also say here before I begin this slide is We Sociable as a company are probably smaller than a lot of your companies here, right? We have less than 200 employees, and I still want to tell you that as a company, we use all the different tools that I'm going to talk about just now in a digital workplace. So if your excuses, we are too small or we are not ready, they're just that. They're just excuses. Okay. So let's get started. What does the digital workplace look like? Number one, authentication for everyone. So yes, of course, like I mentioned, having a single authentication for all your employee apps is important. For example, this could be your SSO, your single sign-on, whether it's Office 365, Okta, whatever you're using. Very important that this authentication should apply to both the desktop and the mobile. Next, so these are ones you're still familiar with, so I'm going a little faster. The next is the cloud office. So this is your Office 365 or your Google Suite, whatever you're using. Um, After this is your document repository. So this has all your cold information. So, for example, we use SharePoint. You might have your own private intranet that hosts all your cold information. Something important to remember here is having an offline mode. So, somewhere where maybe your employees can access and work on documents even if they're on flight, even though that sounds like something in the future, it probably will be there again. So maybe an example of this is using OneDrive with your SharePoint. That's something we do. It makes accessing and working on our documents very easy. Um, the next one is your collaboration tool. So I'm giving you examples of what we use just so you can make the connect. We use Microsoft Teams, for example, and I know some of you do as well. What this tool does is collaboration. It's working on your projects. So it's very straightforward to the point that, okay, if I'm working on a certain project with my colleagues, I create a channel and this is how we're going to work on it. I think most of you are aware with how Teams works, but something that's important to mention here is your collaboration tools like Teams is also being used externally now. So again, to give you a real example, I am working with Sociable on a book with one of my clients. So Sociable and one of our clients, we're working on a book. And what we're doing is we're using Teams. We have an external channel created where we are collaborating. Okay, so that's your collaboration. The next one is your communication platform. So this is, for example, something that Sociable does. What this platform is for, very different from collaboration. It's not to speak about your projects. It's about talking about your top-down communication. So making sure your company knows about your strategy, your vision, your mission, which keeps changing sometimes. So especially, let's take the remote working scenario. Now you might feel a lack of alignment, or you might feel it in a few months, so making sure that alignment is there. Similarly, bottom up, so getting your employees to answer quizzes, polls, also maybe giving feedback through UGC content, creating their own content. Maybe you also give them industry reports and anything that you think, your social media content. So all of that is your communication. Something I want to talk about here is also advocacy, which honestly can be very well integrated into your communication tool itself. You don't really require a separate tool. What you can do here is make part of your content, so especially let's say your social media content, shareable for your employees. So why would you do that? The idea is that you want your employees to share some of this company content onto their personal social media, so they get you organic reach, they generate leads for you, it helps employer branding. So this is definitely something I recommend, especially with paid media budgets really getting cut just now. So that's an interesting one. The next is your directory. So this is something I think most of you are familiar with, having your employee directory. The points I want to highlight here is just having the names of your employees is not enough. You need to make sure they're well segregated into the right user groups. So whether it's by region, it is by department, this is something that's very important. For example, we use a directory like this even when we are doing communication on social. because you're supposed to be able to target your employees based on which user group they belong to. So targeted personalized communication is very important, which means you need to have a secure directory, also smart offboarding, onboarding. These are elements that you should look into with your directory. So try to automate it as much as you can instead of the manual changes a lot of us do. The next is unified communication. So again, I think this is something most of you are familiar with. This would be your WebEx or your Zoom, like we are doing now. So this is something that I think a lot of people were already using. It's just increased in use with the current scenario. So almost towards the end of this slide. The next one is task management. So what we use here is Trello. So I don't know if you've heard of it, but what it basically does is it helps you put in a new task. And if you're working on that task with colleagues, you can add those people onto that board, and then you just keep moving it from one level of completion to another. So it's very focused. The KPI is very clear. It's just to manage your tasks. The next one is something, again, a lot of us already use. This is your HR app. So you could be using something that you've privately developed as a company, but you could also be maybe using an external third-party tool. So we use, for example, Luca. What this does is your basic payroll or attendance, asking for leave, things like that. The next one, okay, I see a lot of questions coming. I'm going to take all of them towards the end. So please feel free to keep putting them in. The next one is an e-learning platform. So again, this could be something you may have developed internally, but it's always easier to take already ready platforms. So we use a platform called Talent LMS. What this does is we put up courses on maybe how do you invoice, or how do you do, consulting, or how do you work on a new feature and things like that. So it's especially great for new joinees and even for new updates when the company has them. And lastly, just any other business apps you use, your CRM and just other tools which are more specific to your organization. And there it is for you on the screen, your digital workplace. I think if I showed you this slide just like this, most of you would be very overwhelmed. I think I would too. And that is why this subject sounds so overwhelming, because there's just so many voices around it. But as you saw, if I break it down into parts, and there you know exactly what the tools are, and you know exactly what each tool is supposed to do, it's actually not that overwhelming. And once you have it and once it starts functioning, you'll see the things like measurement and automation are just going to give you so many better results. So of course, every change feels scary at the beginning, but as we know, after you've done it, it's just a lot more rewarding. Before I move on to this to the second half of the presentation, I just want to mention here that I know I have kept saying that you need specialized separate apps for different things, as you see here. But I am not against the fact that when required, your apps need to speak to one another. So again, let me give you some realistic examples from our clients and from what we do ourselves. So for example, we use Teams for collaboration, and we use Sociable for communication. But what we do is we can have Sociable put completely inside Microsoft Teams. So I'm on Teams for collaboration, and I can go to Sociable for communication. But the fact that I have a window for Sociable inside Teams, it's nice because I can switch between collaboration and communication easily, for example. Another example would be maybe on your SharePoint, you have so many documents, and you've updated something, but of course it's lost in everything, and you want to highlight that update. So it's interesting to have a link of that document or that conversation from Teams put onto your communication tool, like on Sociable, put it onto maybe a channel or just a single post that once clicked on leads you to this particular document. Similarly, for e-learning, again, when you maybe have new courses in the beginning, if people have not yet taken up to your e-learning, it's interesting to drive traffic from one platform to another. Okay, so I'm hoping. Okay, wait. I have two participants who've raised their hand. Sorry. Yes. Okay, so I'm just gonna finish this section, and okay, I see the questions. Yes. So give me a little more time before I jump to the questions. I have covered a big chunk of what the digital workplace is. what I intend to do now in the second half of this presentation, which will just take a few minutes, is because we have been deploying the communication part of the digital workplace for a lot of our clients. We have seen, and what we like to do is when we are deploying this, we try to take a step back and look at the client's holistic workplace, right? So through this, we've got a few learnings, a few warnings, a few best practices that I think might be relevant for you. Because believe it or not, most of these have been repetitive. A few times you have a few different warnings or best practices, but otherwise, a lot of these, work across industries, size of company. So let's start there. Okay, so the next one, a few warnings, like I said. Oh, the very important one, collaboration and communication. So, again, to give you context from the previous slide, collaboration was something like what a Teams does, and communication was something, for example, that Sociable does. Now, these are two very different subjects. Sociable does not do collaboration, Teams does not do communication, but often companies try to use one for the other, and that causes chaos. KPIs, remember KPIs. So, just very simply, what is the difference? Collaboration, straight to the point. You're talking about your projects, my projects, working on documents. Communication is the information you otherwise ignore. It is about your values, about the vision, about maybe having your own voice to the content, the company's vision. So, very distinct subjects. uh, a few basic tips for communication that sometimes are avoided by companies. So, one is the branding and the design and the visual aspect. So, I know we say looks are deceptive, don't judge a book by its cover, but I think a lot of us do, and we're guilty of it. And first impressions they do have an impact. So, being able to see your company colors on the newsletter that you send from your communication app, or seeing your company colors on the branded mobile app that you use makes a difference. So I do have, for example, clients who use Sociable as it is, and then I have clients who use Sociable with the branding of their colors and just their complete branding, and I have seen that that actually has a direct impact to engagement. So that's something I recommend as well. Another thing we've noticed is employees like reading content in their own language. So I will be honest, this is something I have seen happen more in global companies. So if you're a company in India that has global presence, especially in Europe, this is huge. Employees really want to read content in French or in Spanish. But also in India, while it's a more want than a need. Having employees being able to read their content in their local language, so whether it's Tamil or Hindi or Bengali, it makes a difference. So how we tackle this, for example, on Sociable, is we have a live translate. So even though as a company you're creating the content in, say, English, if I want to read it in Hindi, I just click on live translate and I read it in my language. Okay. The next one, this is something I spoke about in the directory, but it really applies to communication as well. Segment your audience, target your audience. We have come far from the place where you used to have one platform that had all the information, and then the employees had to look for their information. So that is something that you should not be doing. You should be having your different user groups based on region. So maybe you have a user group for Europe, and then you subcategorize it into cities. This is very important. Even on Sociable, you'll be targeting your employees based on these different audience groups. So I'm going to pause for a second. I see a few chats just to make sure there's anything for me. Okay, doesn't open over here. So I'm going to continue before I go on to your chats and your Q&A. Just a few more slides. So this one's a very interesting one. It is about the boundary between internal and external. And I don't just mean in communication, but also in collaboration and other aspects. So let me give you a few realistic examples. So the first one was communication. Now, this is the advocacy element that I spoke to you of, where your employees have been your advocates, honestly, for a very long time. This is not a new concept that the millennials have created. Employees used to talk about their company years ago. It was just that they did it at the water cooler, and now we do it on social media. And because it's on social media, it's amplified. But I know that sounds scary, and we are all maybe as HR and communications often we get very overwhelmed and are probably scared of what an employee or someone else is going to say about the brand on social media. But the fact that this can be amplified can also be an advantage. So hear me out before you maybe think otherwise. But since your employees have this ability to talk about you on social media and amplify that message, if you give them the right positive content and enough motivation, gamification, and incentive to share that content, you're actually going to reach so many new people. Your brand trust is going to increase. You're going to have more organic leads, and the list goes on. Right? So this is an important element. Of course, I could do a whole other session on advocacy, so I'm going to put very few points that I think are important to know. It should all happen with one click. So the fact that you want your employees to do something for you, and then if you want them to go through 10,000 hoops and to do it, it's not going to work out. So very easy on the mobile, one click is an important factor. Another thing to keep interesting is don't just bombard your employees with company content. Have industry and third party content that's relevant for them, for their personal branding, if you want them to share your content and be your ambassadors long term. So, short term, just the gamification, the points for them sharing your content might work, help your employer branding for short term. But if you want long term results, things like thinking about personal branding, about industry content is what will give you the edge. Like I mentioned already, external, internal line shrinking is not just for communication. I gave you the example of Teams. We're now working with clients on Teams as well. So, this is something I think is only going to grow. um, Analytics are good, but action is better. So I think with analytics, it's important to say here, let's take internal communication with your employees. For a very long time, we have not been measuring this part of communication as much as we can. We have maybe been sending WhatsApps or newsletters or emails, and we know if someone's opened it. But there's so much more we can do. For example, on Sociable, you're able to see, okay, our employees, how many of them are inactive, how many of them have read a certain news, how many of them have shared it, how many leads that's generated. There's just so many different analytics that you can have. That being said, very important to couple these analytics with action. So again, if I know that so many people are inactive on the platform, knowing that is not enough. I have to do something about it. So use automated features on on your platform of choice, where maybe you can target people who have been inactive through particular content, sending out a newsletter, just maybe having a separate challenge for these employees. So these are things that you can do to make sure your analytics are coupled with action. And I know I said this before, but to reiterate, a single chat option is a losing battle. Think of yourself personally for a minute. You might even talk to the same people on WhatsApp, on Instagram, on Snapchat, on Facebook, on email, but you know which app to go to depending on whether you're sending a personal long message or a meme. Correct? This is something that's going to happen even professionally. It already is. Don't underestimate your employees. Don't try to think that, oh, if they can chat with each other on Teams, which is for collaboration, and also on Sociable, which is communication, and also on email, then how's it going to work? Your employees are smart. They will figure it out. You just have to make sure again that you make the use case of every app very, very clear. Okay, last section, very few slides. I just want to share a few more best practices that have really worked for us internally and for my clients. So, the first one, I know I've said this in a few different ways, but so important, so I'm going to reiterate it. Um, Getting a new tool for your digital workplace is a lot more than a technical upgrade. It is a change management project. So how do you make this a change management project? So one, visualization, as we say to do it in our personal lives, do it for this as well. Sit down and see, imagine what do you want your digital workplace to look like. the slide I drew with your different mind map, you can make your own as well and say, okay, this is what I have covered, this is what's missing, this is what I want it to look like. Correct? That's step one. Gather commando force. So this is basically, again, like I said, make sure your teams are aligned, your execs give you their blessings, or in fact, if they're involved, that's even better. Define your governance. So very in line with my previous point. Make sure your timelines and your responsibilities internally are very clear. The next one, I know it's a little contrary to my previous slide where I said that the tool is not everything. But that being said, the tool is a very important part. So, a few tips on when you're choosing your platforms. So, one is make the choice of your tool early. So, again, I have seen this mistake happen a few times where I've sometimes had clients tell me, you know what, we don't know our strategy yet. We still need time. We still need to figure what we want. And of course, you need to have your basic vision, as we discussed, clear, but you need to choose your platform early, because when you choose your platform early, it's actually going to help you make your strategy, not the other way around. Because when you know, okay, these are the tools I'm using, you already know, okay, what is possible to do, what is automated, what is not, how many hours is this going to take. You plan your governance, it helps you plan everything, right? uh, Avoid endless unrealistic lists. If you find a platform that does 80% of what you want to do, get started. Doing is more important after you've done a relative amount of thinking. Validate the support capacity of all your vendors. So when we say support, I know the first thing in our head is technical, and it's very important, of course, to work with platforms that are secure, as well as have the technical scalability for you to deploy to a large number of employees. But also, I would say having support more in terms of the strategy as well as trainings. These go a long way, because if you're left alone in the beginning, you may have a great tool, but it's not going to work. And this is exactly why you often have so many companies using the exact same tools, but the way it's implemented is often what makes the difference. Okay, the other is gauge the solution. Okay, this is my last tip before we go to Q&A, and I think it's the most important one. So gauge your platforms or solutions according to personas and use cases. Now, generally, at least from what I've seen in my experience, your IT or your communications or some team is going to form a list of features that they want in a product. And honestly, that's great. Having a vision of the features you want is great. But what is more important is realistic use cases. And this is something that most organizations often miss entirely. Okay, so one, for example, is identify personas. What this means is, who are your employees? Who are you trying to communicate with? Are these blue collar? Are they, what languages do they speak? Know your employees, and then actually think, okay, the tools I'm using, can I communicate to these set of employees, right? How are they going to access? What do they like reading? Similarly, use an actual use case. So let's take the current scenario. Let's say that your company has decided that maybe 80% or 90% of their workforce is going to work remotely for the near future. Okay, so this is not just about lockdown, this is about an actual organizational change which is happening in India and across the globe, very rampantly, with large organizations. So if you are a company who wants to communicate this to your employees, take this example and say, okay, what are the 10 things I need to be able to communicate? I need to be able to maybe go live with my employees once a week. I need to maybe have a certain content buckets where I'll have different rules that need to be followed. I also want feedback from my employees on what's working, what's not. So make your list of things that you want to communicate, that you need this project to be, and then actually realistically take the tools that you're maybe testing out and say that, okay, does this tool allow me to do this, and think of it as an individual communication, team, department, company wide. Okay, and my last point here is lead by example. So this might be a very important one. This happens in two ways. So one is more as a user, and the other is more as a manager. So as a manager, let me tell this to you. I think you already know it. But even if you deploy the best tool in the world with the best strategy, you're always going to have a few people at the beginning who will go back to their old ways, who will maybe go back to WhatsApp or go back to email in the beginning, just because old habits die hard. Okay. And if you want this transformation process to happen faster, as a manager, as management, you have to put your foot down and say, you know what, if you are sending me this information through the old method, I'm just not going to read it. So, for example, when we got Teams, my CEO actually started doing this. I was also sometimes in the first week, I still send something on email, and he saw my email and said, "You send it back to me on Teams, and only then I will see it." So, this is something that's really important. You need to set it straight that this is important, this is urgent. The other thing is, again, practice what you preach. So, to give you an example with maybe the communication and employee advocacy, if you want your employees to start sharing your content, start engaging internally, do it yourself. You also share content, you also engage internally. They should see you on that leaderboard. It makes so much of an impact, sometimes even more than the gamification and the prizes. So yes, that is about it. I'm not gonna. This is just here, so you know we work with a lot of companies who are doing great things with digital across the globe. And it's time for the Q&A. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, but I'm going to give you a minute. I'll probably reshare my screen again if you want to just take note of contact information, because I will answer a couple of questions now. But if you have more specific conversations you want to have, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. Okay, for the tool, for trainings, you know who to reach out to. Okay, so stop share. And okay, so what I'm going to do is look at the questions. Kaushik here from Adani. How copyrights and IP rights are taken care in such a digital workplace environment? Honestly, that's a great question. Again, I think IT teams could probably do an entire session on this. But Kaushik, what I would say is, again, making sure things like GDPR, for example. One is making sure data privacy. None of your tools are storing data that they shouldn't be storing. They should have infrastructure maybe on a Microsoft or maybe on just different platforms that you can check. So your IT team, your security team is going to have to run through documents, and I can trust you they will, before they deploy any of these tools. I can, of course, have a separate discussion with you even after this, share some insights based on maybe particular client stories that have worked to take care of this. Do we get the recording of this session? Yes, you do. We will send a replay this week itself, so you can go through it again and come back to us if you have specific maybe questions. Kaushik, second question: how do we protect personal data with single sign-on? So this is what I was saying. So I think there are levels to it. Okay, wait. Before I continue answering, Kaushik and others, if you can just message me in the chat to see if, just say yes if you can hear me and hear the answers clearly. Okay, super. Thank you. So continuing, so one, let me tell you, Kaushik, for example, with employee advocacy, this is in fact something that is so crucial with employee advocacy, because you're not only giving your employees data internally, but you're also getting them to share this data externally on social media, which I know at the onset sounds like, oh my God, can I do that? So that's why having GDPR compliance, making sure, for example, at Sociable, we don't store any data except the employee's name. We can't do any tracking. We refuse to do any tracking of analytics that is outside of the API scope. Like, for example, if your employee shares an article, we can tell you if someone clicked on it and if you generated a lead. But we cannot tell you if someone liked or commented on it, because that is against GDPR. We do have tools in the market who do that. So it's very important to make sure you choose something that is compliant. With single sign on, honestly, when I say single sign on, let me take Sociable's example since I know it best. What we do single sign on for is primarily, one, for convenience, so that your employees do not need a password, but also for security with smart offboarding. So let's say someone leaves your organization tomorrow, you don't need to come, separately to Sociable or your other apps then to remove access. automatically, once their email ID is cut off, their access is cut off. Now I do know when it comes to sociable teams, these are apps that are easily usable, even by companies like a Microsoft or banks that we work with. But when it comes to maybe your private internet or a SharePoint, this is a conversation that you would have to have with your IT team to see what are the documents that is okay to be accessible on the mobile. So I hope that answers your question. The next question I have is, what is the tool you mentioned for task management? So it's Trello, Trello. That's the one we use. We really like it. We've sworn by it, and my product team loves it. Every time our clients have new maybe demands or desires for new features, it works really well for us to put it in there, and then our product team keeps updating it from one task level to another. Okay, next question. Currently, if we have different applications to serve all those needs, social works as an aggregator on top of it, do we get some results as well? So that's from Manan. Manan, I think I would first specifically, speak to you offhand and understand which are the apps. So do you have an app that because I often have clients who already have intranets that do communication, but that communication is often static in the sense that it's maybe just announcements here and there, but it's not equipped with the right interface, with the gamification, with the advocacy aspect. So we'll have to see what your current tool already covers and what it doesn't. In terms of an integration, yes, Sociable does integrate and aggregate with a lot of things. Like we aggregate with all your social networks. We also integrate with your collaboration tool or your SharePoint or your private internet. The level of integration, however, is something that we discuss based on what is the need. For example, if you have an internet that's not working, then do we want to put sociable inside there because maybe the interface is not working? But if you have an internet that's really working for you, then okay, maybe we want to do a widget or we want to pull content from one to the other. So it's really something we can define. But yes, integrations are possible. What could be possible incentives for marketing, such as digital tools available at the workplace? So that's a great question. I think the first one that comes to mind is advocacy, for example. So, in fact, I work with a lot of marketing teams when it comes to employee advocacy. Because let me draw out a realistic example on how this benefits marketing. If the employees are engaged internally and then they are willing to share some of this content externally on their social media, we have so many ways to help marketing measure that. They're going to be able to one measure, okay, so far website traffic is coming from organic and paid, but now we have another section for advocacy. We know, okay, so many employees have shared our content, and then so many people from their network have actually clicked on it. Then maybe go a level further and see, okay, have they actually, maybe these people have filled out forms and generated actual employer branding or white paper or demo leads for you. So that's when the marketing team really benefits. Okay, how do you calculate ROI with respect to internal communication? That's from Vivan. That's a great question. um, I think there's several ways. One, for example, when we send newsletters from Sociable, you're able to see not just who opened it and who subscribed to it, but also who clicked on it. How many were unique clicks? How many were unique opens? What happened on the mobile? What happened on the desktop? Now that's basic. The next is maybe when you are sending out a message, maybe an urgency message or just a CEO presentation, whatever it is, you want to see how many people attended the live. Maybe you also want to see, if you put up an article or another colleague put up an article, how many people read it, how many people liked it internally, how many people commented on it, how many shared it, how many people from their network clicked on it, how many leads it's got. So this really helps you understand what is the content that my employees are engaging with. Similarly, who are my employees who are maybe internally very engaged vis-a-vis employees who are maybe very engaged on social media. And then maybe some people who have more influence, some people who maybe are opening your newsletters, but then they're not taking actions on social. So it really helps you create these dynamic groups to understand which employees are acting in which way, so that you can create, as we said, action to couple with those analytics. Okay, I hope that answers your question, Vivan. Kshitij says, do you feel that digital workplace will take away emotional quotients in the future where Indian culture believe in human connect? That's a great question. I hope not. I don't think so, honestly. Like I said, I have seen situations where you can have the best tools. Honestly, for example, with Sociable, I genuinely love the product, and I have seen that if it's deployed without assistance from us, as well as in-house participation from the company, for example, by the HR, by the comms, it fails. I mean, when I say fails, it doesn't live up to its potential. So I think not. However, I do think like having video calls like we are today, I think tools will innovate. They will adapt to add human connect. For example, maybe I would have a better way to interact with you by seeing you. Maybe there's sentiment analysis with expressions. You don't know what all is going to happen. I think if technology and human connection are married well, it's going to be a great world. We are currently in the transformation process, but I think when we look back in 2 years, it's going to, oh, I'm hoping 2 years, it's going to be a great world. Okay. Tia says in some cases, employees might want to maintain anonymity, especially for reporting mechanisms. Can such tools handle anonymity? Yes. So, what you will, there are a couple of things. So, for example, when there are personal chats available on the tool, like with Sociable, we have a chat feature on the mobile app where I can talk to my colleague. So one that's encrypted in the sense that we will not be able to, my company cannot see what me and my colleague are talking about. So those are things you have to implement if everything's going technical. You need to have privacy. Another thing is when you're having polls on Sociable, for example, or you're maybe having a link where employees can fill up this link with questions before the CEO goes live on Sociable or something like that. Then you could have, and I would also say that it's true, you should have the ability for employees to have the choice if they want to give their name with the question or no. To give you an example, my CEO goes live every Friday now with the remote working, and he has this link that he shares with us on Sociable where we can go and fill in our questions beforehand, and we can choose to stay anonymous, so he can't see who's asked them. And I think it's been appreciated because, especially in the beginning, people had a lot of questions maybe about their salary or their security of their job and things like that, which they may not have wanted their name to be associated with it. Right? Okay. Achal, can we run internal comms through such platforms? Okay, there are a lot of questions. So I'm going to take it one by one. What kind of metrics will be available? So yes, let me give you an example. At Sociable, and when I say at Sociable, I mean internally as a company, we are using Sociable, and what we do is we recently had an internal campaign called Share Your Desk. So what we started doing is we started getting all our employees to use the UGC feature and share pictures of their current remote working desk. And that was a campaign that was on Sociable. It had its own leaderboard depending on which employee's post got the most likes. It works so well that we replicated it for share your reading as well as share your food. So, yes, these are things that you can do. And of course, you can export your analytics and see what worked and what didn't. Okay, next one by Achal. How do we manage employees on such platforms? Do we moderate all conversations? How do we manage employee sentiment? So yes, like I said, a few things you have to let go of for like your personal chat. Make sure it's not something you're being able to read technically. Things like moderate comments. So maybe let your employees comment, but on Sociable, for example, we have a compliance pack that helps you delete comments or moderate them if they're not appropriate. You can put in keywords that are off limits. You could also have comment sentiment analysis to see, are the comments happy, sad, not so sad. And I think these are things with AI that are going to improve even more. Does this platform have the option to host webinars with employees across cities? So like I said, I'm very of the opinion that you need to have separate tools that do separate things. Now, Sociable does not do what a Zoom does, and Zoom does not do what Sociable does. They're used for two different, very different use cases. That being said, if you want to maybe go live on Sociable with your CEO, or and make a presentation, as long as it's for your employees, it's related to comms. I Yes, we can do that. We do it. My CEO goes live every Friday. A lot of my clients do it. So yes, that is something that can be done. Wow, we have a lot of questions. So Deepa says, how can we track employees working from home? Great question. So so this is, I think, a larger subject that again can be a whole other webinar. I think one, we have to start, getting out of the mindset where employees are going to be tracked on how many hours they sit on their seat. Because I think when the studies that are happening now and what we are going to see is that just because someone is on their seat in office doesn't mean they're getting you the results. We're going to go into a very performance centric measurement, which I think is great because it's going to mean more productivity for employees as well as for companies. That being said, if your question is more with regard to tracking of communication, then like I said, you have a lot of metrics on Sociable with communication. Similarly, you probably have metrics with your different other tools for task management or logins that you've put into place based on your company. Okay, we have a question saying, how do you calculate ROI with internal communication? I think I covered this previously. We can even have a whole separate conversation after. I'm more than happy to. Neha says, can we have a separate app apart from our HR app for communication and internal com? If yes, can we integrate it with the existing platform? Does Sociable have an inbuilt internet? So first, yes, please, like I said, don't have the same app for your employee communication and for your mundane HR tasks. You have to have a different place that people go to apply for leave, and where they go to get maybe information about the vision and strategy of the company. So yes, have two different apps. For example, if I have different rooms where I'm going to work and play, you see places have energy, they make a huge difference. So it's the same with tools. The design, the way you communicate about the tool makes a huge difference. Integration, yes, again, we'd study it on a custom basis and understand, but we'd probably have a widget of Sociable in your current HR app, maybe have a link to your HR app on Sociable, etc. So these are things that we can do. Collaboration versus communication, how can organizations improve on identifying its nuances and not repeating its mistakes? So I think, Rida, you've put a complete question, which is maybe an entire webinar again. But the brief, like I said, one first, very beginning, just identify, uh, are you as a company, are you already doing both? Do you have tools for both? Do you have tools for one? Make sure, for example, like I said, top management setting the priority is very important. Like, make sure if someone starts doing collaboration on Sociable or communication on Teams, it's not going to be done well. So if you spot it, make sure it's identified and lead them back to the right platform. This might sound like a headache in the beginning, but honestly, you're setting up success for a lot more in the future. Does digital workplace work for a company of less than 50 employees? Yes. So this is what I said in the beginning as well. We are a small organization. We also have clients who are smaller than us, and it works because at the end of the day, you need to have, maybe you won't have as many, the last tab that I showed, the business apps, maybe you won't have as many of them. But having a tool for your collaboration, for your communication, most of these, the good thing for you are SaaS platforms that work on a license model. So you're not going to be paying the same cost as someone who has 10,000 or 100,000 employees. So yes, it's definitely something you should look into. It's not restricted. Thank you, Arpita, for the kind words. Yes, for sure, I will send the presentation across to you. Okay, how can we have the last two here? How can we measure output to track leads and incentivize people? Okay, so I'm going to tell you this from Sociable's perspective. What we do is for incentivization, Sociable is completely gamified. What that does is any action you take on the platform, like if your employee likes a post, creates content, answers a quiz, whatever they do, they win points that have been set up by you. So you're going to be able to define what activity is most important that employees should win more points for. How you incentivize this, you can do the normal. We have we have clients who do vouchers, Amazon vouchers. We also more and more have rewards in the form of e-learning courses. Personal development really works with the new gen, especially now, even with the others, because I think upskilling is a big subject. Also CSR. So, for example, what we do with Sociable is we have integrated with a big global NGO, technical integration, that allows you as a company to choose your project and your budget, and then you can actually gift your employees trees that are really planted in the world. So it's a really nice way to add CSR. We are now looking at having a plastic bank integration as well. So maybe this is something you want to look into as well. How to track? So with Sociable, what we do is we have something called the SOC ID. What that helps you do is every time your employees share your content on social media, you can track the number of people who've clicked on that content. This is all GDPR compliant. And then based on what we define with your IT team, we could also track if someone went and filled out a form, maybe. Last one here. How many data scientists do you need to create this tool? I'm happy to tell you none. Even with Sociable, for example, we use our own product for communication. And then we use all external products that are already ready in the market for collaboration, for task management, for document repository. So honestly, I would say stop trying to spend so much time and money to develop these products and then maintain them, which is going to cost as much as probably costs us to run our whole company and other SaaS platforms as well. So my recommendation would definitely be there are so many tools for so many different things in the market. Don't waste time. Check them all out, do your research, and choose the ones that work for you. The last one, how can we deal with employees who do not believe in this digitization? Great question to end the Q&A with. So honestly, like I said, one is top management, and not just top management, but just management in general. Setting the route is very important. So, for example, if you're deploying a tool like Sociable, I always tell my clients, please, management send out the email about why we are launching this. Be there in the user training to tell your employees why this is important. Participate on the tool itself so they can see you on the leaderboard. This motivates them. I have often, in 2017, when I was deploying a tool like Sociable with companies, I sometimes even had questions saying, my boss is going to think I'm not doing any work if I'm on this app, and questions like this. So this is why it coming from management, having incentivization that motivates employees, having the right kind of content, having the right kind of ongoing communications, so a lot of aspects, which is why you see you need the right strategy with the tool as well. Wow, so thank you guys. That was a lot of Q&A. I have a few in the chat. I'm just going to try to answer a few. Thank you for all the kind words you've put here. Who earns internal com, HR or communication? I want to ask you. I get this question all the time. It's different. It's really different for different people. Like I said, it's so useful for HR as well as for communications, as well as, of course, for IT and for marketing. So it's a decision you have to make internally. I wish I could answer this for you, but I think it's a joint decision. One of the teams generally takes the initiative. I've often seen it's either HR or comms, and then obviously aligns and gets in the other team into the conversation as well, and we kind of close on the strategy together. So I would say it's everyone, but any one of these teams can take the initiative to get it up and running. And of course, organization specifics differ. So a few people have asked me to send them the replay, which of course I will be doing. Okay, we have a long question here. Okay, this is the same one that was in Q&A. So Achal have answered that. Okay, I think most of them are a few repetitions. I have a few more, but I'll have to go through them. So what I will do is I will go through all the questions again. We will create kind of a document which has all the Q&A that we'll be able to send you. We'll also send you a replay. And like I said, you can reach me at krusha.sahjwani. I'm going to put it here again at sociable.com if you want to have private discussions about the platform. You can also reach out to digital HR as well as Kobas if you want to talk about trainings and consultancy related to your employer branding or just the power of digital in HR. Super. So, when do you hear from me next? This week. I will be in all your inboxes this week, and don't hesitate to even proactively reach out to me if you need anything. I'm fairly prompt on my emails, and I will be more than happy to answer any of your specific questions or even have a long chat to figure this out with you. Super. So thank you everyone for spending an hour with me. I think we've done very well on time. I hope it wasn't too quick for you. We'll of course send you a feedback form as well, where you can maybe hopefully just put in your feedback. I'm putting a link here as well. So feel free to use this link. I'll also send it to you on email. Give us your feedback. It'll just help us help you more. So thank you. Go back to your Tuesday. I know we are all working even more during the current scenario, so I won't keep you longer. We at Sociable are very excited for the future of the digital workplace or the present, and are here to help you. Thank you. Thank you again, Digital HR and Cobuzz, and everyone who joined. I will go through all the comments that I missed in the next hour, and I'm happy and looking forward to chat with all of you personally. Have a great day. Thank you. Thank you. I really appreciate all the kind words. So I'm going to let you leave and I'm going to leave in 5 minutes. I have FOMO. I don't want to miss out on comments after I've left.